Chapter 32. Dinner unfolded in a quiet, warm atmosphere. The voices, though animated, kept a gentle cadence, as if everyone knew the night still weighed heavy on the shoulders of those who had crossed it with wounds on their souls. Candles spilled golden light over the faces, and the scent of roasted lamb, freshly baked bread, and spiced roots floated between the planks of the long table. Arianwen sat beside Rhiannon, and across from them, the youngest children laughed between crumbs and sticky fingers under Aetienne's watchful gaze. Further down, Thalen, Conall and Eorn had begun to speak in low voices, sharing stifled laughter and hushed memories that sometimes faded into dense silences, full of things that couldn't be said in front of everyone. As the plates emptied and the younger ones were taken off to bed, Conall rose with a brief motion. Eorn followed, without even glancing at Arianwen, and the two disappeared down the corridor leading to the study. Thalen took his leave with a hand on his daughter-in-law's shoulder, and a phrase whispered softly like a blessing. "Sleep easy tonight, daughter. This is your home." Arianwen remained for a moment alone in the hall, her skin still warm from the elder's touch. She forced herself to take a deep breath. Then she noticed Rhiannon was still there, watching her with the quiet wisdom of someone who had lived through many nights like this one. "Has Eorn retired already?" Arianwen asked, unable to hide the hint of disappointment in her voice. Rhiannon raised her eyebrows with a half-smile. "Not far," she replied. He and Conall opened a bottle of the water of life. "I think tonight they have a lot to say, and much to leave unsaid as well." "Water of life," Arianwen repeated, trying to sound curious. "A strong whiskey, the kind that warms you to the bones. Don't hold it against him. It's been years since they've had a peaceful night together. Before all this, they were inseparable." Arianwen nodded slowly. She had already accepted that tonight, she would sleep alone. She understood, she told herself. She truly did. And still, a small wound opened in her chest without permission. "Would you like to stay with me a while?" Rhiannon asked. "Men talk about men's things, but sometimes we also need to speak what doesn't fit into everyday words." Arianwen agreed with a fragile smile, and the two of them moved away from the table toward the hearth. They sat on a thick rug, a cup in their hands, their backs warmed by the fire. "Eorn," Arianwen began, unsure how to continue. "He always seems so whole, so steady. But last night he fell asleep instantly, then woke up. I know something weighs on him, even if he won't say it." "Too many things weigh on him, dear," Rhiannon replied, her eyes filled with an ancient tenderness. "Exile didn't just steal years from him, it stole certainty. Sometimes the body comes back but the soul takes longer to find its way home." Arianwen lowered her gaze to the embers. The heat burned in her eyes. "I thought that, by marrying, I had brought him back. That he had finally found his home." Rhiannon didn't answer right away. Then in a soft voice she said, "Perhaps he has. But even trees need time to take root again, after being torn from the ground. And you have been the rain. The one who's helped him bloom again." Arianwen looked up at her, surprised. "And if he never truly takes root?" "Then he'll be a hawk, not an oak," Rhiannon answered with a wistful smile. "But he'll keep coming back to you. Because you are the sky he looks to when he flies." The two women fell silent. Beyond the corridor, they could hear the distant murmur of low voices, muffled laughter, a bottle being refilled. Arianwen thought that the silence of that night said more than many words. And that maybe love didn't always come like in the stories, but it could still be built slowly, with honest hands. She rose a little later, when sleep grew heavy on her eyelids. Rhiannon saw her off with a warm embrace. "Sleep well, Arianwen. Tomorrow is a new day." And Arianwen climbed the stairs alone, feeling that something inside her, though restless, no longer felt quite so alone. She couldn't sleep. The bed, which until recently had offered her refuge and warmth, now felt strange, foreign. Something inside her, a persistent sting, a formless premonition, compelled her to rise barefoot, wrapped only in her cloak. The fortress slept, but it was not silent. From the upper gallery a light still burned, casting a golden line beneath the study door. Voices. 2. She recognized Aeon's, and behind it the deeper tone of Connell. She didn't know why she approached. Perhaps because something in her chest suddenly tightened, as if a part of her already knew what she was about to hear. She stopped on the other side of the door, palm pressed against the stone, and held her breath. Arianwen, inner voice. Why did I choose a man who couldn't stay? Maybe because I was always on the verge of leaving too. Not from this world but from myself. Aeon was a broken promise I recognized as my own. His silence spoke the language of my own abandonment. In his eyes I saw the longing of a love that hadn't known how to take care of itself. And I threw myself into the abyss of caring for him. As if that could save the little girl no one ever held in me. But loving someone broken doesn't fix you. It only shows you where you're still broken too. Now I know. I didn't come to complete anyone. I came to remember myself whole. And in that mirror, I saw who I was. Chapter 33. The chamber was cloaked in shadows when Aeon opened the door, letting the dawn slip in like a wound. The study still smelled of whiskey and old smoke. He had spent hours with Connell, drafting plans that never quite took shape, trying to straighten a reality that slipped through their fingers like water. Sharing the night with his brother had brought some relief. But deep down, what he longed for wasn't strategy or victory. He just wanted to feel Arianwen's body beneath the blankets, that quiet warmth that anchors a man when everything else threatens to fall apart. But the bed was cold. He ran his hand over the mattress, the sheets, nothing. The alarm rising in his chest was immediate. Her name left his lips in a whisper the dying fire couldn't console. Arianwen. He lit a candle. The flame danced across the furniture and revealed the absence. On the desk, a note. Brief. Lethal. Beside it, the ribbon in Macdara colors, folded with a delicacy that tore him apart. Fiacre never touched me beyond what you saw in the cabin. I would never have hidden something like that from you, no matter how ashamed I felt. Feeling obligated to protect someone is not the same as love. Aeon felt the air ripped from his lungs. The paper trembled in his hands as understanding sank in. She had heard. She had heard every word spoken in confidence to Connell, every phrase that now turned to knives. He who thought himself cautious had let his fear slip through, his doubt, his clumsy attempt to explain the unexplainable. And she had read it all. He started moving without pause, half blind with anguish. Every corridor of Ter Nah Oya rejected him, as if the stone itself knew he had made an irreparable mistake. No one had seen her. Each empty room echoed his calls with silence. Until he reached the stables. He woke the stable boy with a shout and a shake. The boy took a moment to find his words. Lady Arianwen. I think yes. I saw her leave tonight, with Hugh the messenger. She said she'd go with him, to make sure her letter reached her father. What letter? The boy went pale. The one you gave him yesterday, my lord. She found it. And she said that if he left without her, she'd go alone. She told him that if anything happened to her on the road, he'd carry the blame. Aeon stepped back. The cold sank into his spine. And Hugh agreed. My lord, she seemed resolute. She looked at him, the way someone does when their mind is already made up. She threatened him so calmly that Hugh chose to go with her. Aeon released him. But something didn't add up. The letter? How did Arianwen know it was meant for her father? And why didn't Hugh alert anyone? Hugh was responsible, careful. He wouldn't have risked disobeying such a clear order, unless someone told him to. Or, unless he was already involved. Did you see anyone else? Did she speak to anyone before leaving? No, my lord, or yes. Now that I think of it, one of the tower guards was here for a while just before. It struck me as odd, but I didn't think. Eorn glared at him. A suspicion opened inside him like a crack in ice. What if it hadn't been an impulsive decision, but a trap? What if someone had pushed her to leave, knowing dangers awaited on the road to Tuiran o Calia, dangers he couldn't even imagine? He re-entered the fortress like a man possessed. It was no longer just his wife he was searching for, it was the truth. And whoever had pulled the strings of that betrayal would soon learn what it meant to awaken the fury of a Macdara. Eorn in a voice. Why was I drawn to a woman who seemed all light, all certainty? Because her tenderness made me uneasy. Because her unconditional love brushed against the edge of what I believed I deserved. I wanted to protect her from me. But the truth was, I didn't know how to live without armor. Arianwen saw what I hid even from myself. And she didn't run. I did. Guilt was my armor. Her love, my mirror. Now I know. I wasn't rejected. I was called to heal. The soul doesn't repeat out of punishment. It does so to remember the way back. Going back to her is going back to myself. Chapter 34. When Eorn crossed the threshold of the Great Hall, something in the air warned him that the world had tilted once again toward darkness. The uneasy murmur of the servants was like a misspoken prayer at dawn. The early light spilling through the windows fell onto the stone floor like a broken promise. The soul of the castle pulsed with an ancient anguish, and his chest suddenly filled with ash once more. Then he saw them, Conall Diarmid and his uncle flanked by Tor Rúine, Talon and Fiach. All with hardened faces, their eyes heavy with an omen that wrapped around him like icy fog.
"What's happening?" asked Eorn, though his voice already knew the answer.
"The sentries have sounded the alarm," said Thalen Macdara, his tone dry as the crackle of old branches. 2 armies are advancing on Tir Nah Oiha. The siege will be complete before midday. There's no time to flee. Only to resist. Eorn's heart clenched, not as muscle but as memory. An old wound tore open beneath the skin of his chest, invisible and sharp. It wasn't just fear of battle, it was the guilt that had stolen his breath so many winters ago. "Two," he murmured. "Macaba and Mac Tuathal," Conall explained. "From both fronts. We're surrounded. Every escape is sealed." Visions from the past surged in Eorn's mind, thick smoke, torn screams, the stench of hot iron. Blood on snow. And this time, the image that pierced him was Arianwen. Far away, perhaps safe. Perhaps cursing him for all he had left behind. Perhaps. "There are no reinforcements that can reach us in time," he whispered, more to himself than to them. "They will come," said Diarmid, with a faith that seemed to root him to the earth. "Rúine and Fiach will take the shadow passage. They'll ride north and west. With luck, the MacDonalds and the Macades will answer quickly." But in Eorn's mind, what rang loudest was the echo of his own mistake. If he hadn't killed Fiachra. If he had waited. If he had listened to anything beyond the fury in his blood. "I caused this," he said, stepping back like a man realizing he's walking toward a cliff.
"The children, my sister."
Rhiannon. 18. What kind of peace have my actions brought? Conall stepped forward, his gaze sharp as the edge of a tempered axe. "Not now, Eorn. Not this moment. I need my brother, not the man dragging invisible chains. Your hands know how to fight. Your spirit knows how to endure. That's who we are. Warriors, not for the thirst of death, but for the love of our own." Eorn forced himself to look at him. To really see him. What he saw in Conall was the bare truth of their clan, the tenacity of oak that breaks before it bends. Duty. Love. The ancestral soul of his people, beating in the skin of his brothers. "To the ramparts," said Diarmid. "Yes," Eorn nodded, straightening his back like a man remembering who he is. "Let's go." But then a guard burst in with the urgency of thunder. "My lord. A messenger approaches. He bears a white flag." Thalen turned back, every step etched with resolve. He wanted to buy time. And to that time he would give a face, Dragon Mactuathal. Dragon's face was an insult to the ground he walked on. He smiled with the confidence of one who has sown death, and expects to reap fear. Aeon recognized him instantly, and with him the poisoned thorn of all he had destroyed. The exchange was a blade without respite. Dragon spoke of honor and vengeance, but his voice reeked of rot. The offer he laid on the table chilled every drop of blood in the room, the life of a Macdara, handed over like a trophy in exchange for peace. Aeon's soul howled. Every fiber of his being tensed like a drawn bow ready to kill. He wanted to lunge at him. End it all. But the memory of Arianwen's gaze held him back. She, who had taught him to see beyond the edge of his sword. "They won't attack," said Connell softly, eyes fixed on the door. And Aeon felt with a deep terror that this wasn't strategy, it was a choice already made. "I won't accept that deal," growled Thalen, more old man than former chieftain. "I won't give up my children. Not even one." Clinging to the cold stone of the windowsill, Aeon stepped out later onto the battlements, searching for air, sky, soul. Caelan circled high above, tracing wide arcs over the castle like a white flame in the grey sky. The falcon did not descend. Did not flee. It only watched, as if it knew that in that moment another battle was being fought, not on the wall but in his heart. And there, in that suspended instant, Aeon understood. He was no longer just the warrior, fighting out of duty. Nor the guilty brother. Nor the repentant son. He was the man who loved. The one who had given away his soul without knowing it, among the trees of Glorndunnock, when a sweet and steady voice had given him back his name. Arianwen. Everything he did from now on would carry her face. Her strength. Her light. And for her, for all those he loved, he would fight. With his feet rooted in the sacred soil of his ancestors. And his soul, like Caelan, winged and watchful above the enemy's shadows. Ter Nah. At the threshold of the storm. The northern winds howled with an ancient lament over the battlements, as if the spirits of the forest sensed what was about to unfold. Clouds loomed over the fortress, low and grey, and the scent of iron and upturned earth mingled with the smoke of lit torches. High on the walls the archers waited in silence, as tense as the nerves of the men who commanded them. Thalen Macdara walked the line like a weathered oak come to life, calm with the knowledge of too many winters to fear one more. In the courtyard, Diarmid was ordering the formations, while Connell and Aeon reinforced the gates, blocked off passages and sent the last servants into the most protected tunnels. Everything was steeped in restrained urgency. "If they get in," murmured Aeon, his voice low, his chest shut tight like damp stone. "If they breach the gates, none of this will matter. I've lived this before. Inside, there's no defense."
"Last time we were unarmed," Connell replied firmly, his eyes clear as the edge of a still lake.
Duran struck when half the clan was fighting in the south. "This time we won't let it happen." Aeon looked at him. Inside something clenched with an icy sting. "You can't do it," he said, barely a whisper. No more words were needed. Between them silence spoke louder than any vow. Connell turned his gaze away but didn't step back. "Do you remember the hidden door beside the stables?" Aeon nodded. It was a forgotten opening in the stone, a hidden wound in the castle's foundations. As boys he and Connell had used it to escape to the hills, when the world felt too narrow. Their father had ordered it sealed, but not completely. "If I go out that way, I won't open the gates. No one will see me. By the time they notice, I'll be long gone." Aeon wanted to stop him, but the words broke in his throat. The weight of anguish hung on him like a soaked cloak. Then the great hall opened, and the murmuring became a storm of footsteps and voices. The women of the clan entered, some carrying blankets, others with pale faces lined with fear. Among them came Rhiannon, alone, her brow furrowed and her eyes lit with fierce resolve. "We haven't found Arianwen," she said briskly. We searched your chamber, the corridors, she's not there. Eon's world halted for a second. Her name floated like a whisper between the cold walls. She left in the night, he replied without lifting his gaze. She went back to her father. A murmur ran through the hall, but no one spoke at first. Only Rhiannon stepped closer, her presence calm, as if shaped from the land itself. Why? Eon inhaled, and the air tasted of moss and ash. Our first fight, or maybe our last. She thinks I don't love her. Thinks I only kept her close as a shield. Rhiannon said nothing. She looked at him with ancient eyes, as though seeing past the veil of words. Is it true, she asked. I protected her the only way I know how, he answered with a shrug, as if that were enough. Maybe I didn't know how to tell her what's going on inside me. Maybe I didn't even know myself until now. High above, a flutter of wings cut the silence. Caelan the hawk watched from a beam still, his eyes glowing like embers. Eon followed his gaze, feeling the hollow pull inside his chest. Caelan wasn't caged. Never had been. He was free. Like Arianwen. Like Eon had once dreamed of being. And now you do? Rhiannon asked softly. Eon didn't answer. But his silence said everything. His eyes had turned toward the entrance, toward the north, where she would have ridden through the forest, across the water, searching for a place to call home. And now he knew he couldn't let her go. Because his home was her. Because his soul, broken and lost, found rest only in her embrace. Conall had moved to Rhiannon, and held her close, whispering something in her ear. Eon saw them, and something tore inside him like a veil being ripped. His brother's words were simple, but they carried the weight of centuries. You're my root, Rhiannon. If I don't return, take care of Eon. He hasn't said everything he feels. She nodded, tears in her eyes. But Eon no longer heard them. His mind had already wandered far to where the ferns gave way to mist, where Arianwen's laughter still echoed in the hills like a forgotten song. He hadn't been honest. Not with her, not with himself. He had lost her in the folds of his pride. And now that everything hung by a thread, all he wanted was to see her again, even if just once more. To tell her not that he'd protected her, but that he loved her. With a certainty born of pain, of loss, of the soul itself. Caelan took flight without warning, vanishing through the high window, as if he too sensed the earth calling for movement, for resolve, for truth. And Eon understood. He couldn't stay still. Not this time. Without looking back, he crossed the hall into the fortress's shadows. The war could wait a moment. Love could not. Eon in a voice. I didn't know how to stay. I had learned to survive by running. From pain. From guilt. From myself. When she looked at me, I felt something in me wanting to surrender. But surrender wasn't peace. It was fear of being seen in my wound. I loved Arianwen, like a man afraid to be loved. Like someone who touches fire knowing it will burn. And still she didn't run. She offered me roots when all I knew was the wind. Now I understand. I wasn't unworthy of love. I just didn't know how to receive it. My war wasn't with her. It was with myself. And maybe to truly love isn't to conquer or protect or possess, but to let someone see you completely and still not walk away. Chapter 35. The cold of the stone still pulsed in Eon's hands, as they removed the last slab sealing the hidden door to the narrow passage. His fingers, bloodied and numb, didn't hurt as much as the weight pressing on his chest. Beside him Conall was breathing hard, his face streaked with dust and determination. He knew he couldn't stop him. His brother had chosen his path with the same conviction he'd had as a boy, standing defiant against the northern storms. And yet seeing him there, wounded but unyielding, he felt a pride that knotted something deep inside. Promise me you'll take care of them, Conall said suddenly, not looking at him, his voice fading into the freshly opened hollow in the wall. Tell Thalen to forgive me. Aeon didn't need to ask who he meant. In that plea lived Rhiannon, her children, their home. The world Conall himself had been unable to protect. "I promise you," he replied, and his eyes spoke for him. Gaze to gaze. Deep blue to steel blue. And in that wordless exchange the brothers sealed more than a promise, they sealed a pact of blood and redemption. As Conall turned toward the exit, Aeon picked up one of the stones they had moved. It wasn't rage trembling in his hands, but the certainty that fate doesn't always choose the strongest, only the most broken. It wasn't a plan. It was an act of faith. Aeon fastened the sword belt at his waist, as if that worn blade might still give him the courage he needed to die in peace. He felt he had to offer something. That his life, broken so many times, might still have meaning if it could save another. Aeon. Rhiannon's trembling voice reached him, like an echo from the world he was leaving behind. He stopped. His name no longer belonged to him. He wasn't Aeon. He was no one. She was there shaking, her eyes red with anguish. He stepped closer cautiously, wishing he didn't have to hurt her again.
"You shouldn't be here," he murmured. "Where's Conall?"
"With Nara."
"But that's not what matters. Tell me the truth."
Her voice broke. "Were you going to leave, without saying goodbye?" Aeon cupped her cheeks. Not like a lover, but like a broken brother asking for forgiveness with his hands.
"It's for all of you."
"For him. For everyone. It's the only way. If I can buy some time, if I can just save you." She didn't answer. She kissed his cheek. As if she knew this would be their farewell. And in that kiss, Aeon felt the vertigo of all the unlived moments, of what would never come.
"What's this?"
Rhiannon whispered, touching the brooch on his shoulder, the symbol that wasn't his. "Tell Conall. I did it for him. And not to hold it against me, that I stole a kiss from his wife." He tried to smile.
"You'll find him at the stables."
"I didn't have time to stop him. Tell him I'm keeping my promise. That I'm watching over his family." As he turned away, Rhiannon grabbed his arm. "Why you?" He didn't answer right away. He looked into the darkness of the passage, as if hoping to find his soul there. 4 years ago, I should have died here. But I lived. And since then I've carried that debt like a chain. Today I want to break it. Then he lowered his voice to a near whisper. "The only thing I regret is not saying goodbye to Arianne when." Rhiannon didn't respond at first. But in her eyes was something new. A deep ancient understanding, feminine and fierce.
"She's a Macdara too.
And we'll protect her, I promise.
But I wish you didn't have to do this."
"You don't have to die, Aeon." He shook his head gently. "It's my fate. And this time I'm not running from it." Rhiannon ran, driven by something stronger than reason. When she reached the stables, she found 18 beside an unconscious Conall. The old woman held a dagger in her hand, and a lock of dark hair lay at her feet. 18. "Years ago, I cut Aeon's hair," she said without looking up. "Today I've done the same with Conall, but this time to save him." A tear traced her wrinkles like an ancient river.
"He asked me to do it."
"He begged me. And I've had to choose between my sons. A mother should never." Rhiannon knelt beside her and embraced her, feeling in her trembling the echo of everything they were losing. "He won't die," she whispered. "Aeon will know what to do. He'll know." But her words fell short. Conall stirred with a groan. Seeing his blood, feeling the haze, he asked for Aeon. He tried to stand. He wanted to shout.
"Where is he? What did he do to me?"
"He gave himself in your place," Rhiannon said, her voice breaking. Conall tried to run, but 18 stopped him with a single word. "No." The force of her cry froze him. And then she spoke, with all the truth a soul can summon in a moment of loss. "Aeon couldn't go on living like this. He's carried a guilt that's been consuming him from within. Now he has the chance to redeem himself. To be free. Conall fell to his knees, defeated. "How can you ask me to let him die again?" "Because if you go you'll both die," Etain whispered. "And Eorn? Eorn would never forgive you. Give his sacrifice meaning. Protect those who remain. Give him a reason to come back." Conall looked at Rhiannon. And in his eyes at last, he nodded. When he stepped into the courtyard, the sky was breaking into a wounded grey light. Caelan soared in wide circles above the fortress, as if Eorn's soul watched from above. And in that moment, Rhiannon knew not all was lost. As long as the hawk flew, Eorn was still there. Free. And love. Chapter 36. Arianwen hadn't seen him arrive. Not even a letter, not the beat of hooves on the path. Only the wind, whistling through the oaks of Glorndunnock with an echo that seemed to ache. She was sitting by the window, Pearl dozing in her lap, when she knew, like an ancient whisper, that Eorn wouldn't come after her. Not this time. Not with the same urgency that once drove him to rescue her. Not out of spite. But because his soul was broken. So was hers. More than she had ever wanted to admit. She had believed, foolishly, stubbornly in love, that her departure would shake the warrior's foundations. That seeing her leave would shatter his words and finally let that love pour out, the one she had sensed hidden behind the frozen surface of his blue eyes. But all she had done was widen the crack between them. And now she felt Eorn's absence like a wound on the skin of her soul. Thoughts spun in her head like branches swayed by the wind. Why hadn't he stayed by her side? Why had he run from the love he had longed so much to find? Why had she expected from him a gesture she hadn't dared give herself? "My impulses are foolish and ill-timed," she whispered, stroking the cat, who shifted beneath her hands as if he too carried her sorrow. She remembered the love spell she had once sought desperately, on a cliff top. Not for Eorn. Not then. It had been for another, the man her father had chosen for her. The memory burned in her throat, because now she understood she had never truly wanted to conjure love, only provoke it. Force it. As if love could be manufactured. But true love doesn't grow from force or fear. It grows from the quiet recognition between two wounded souls. And Eorn. Eorn had seen her wound and accepted it. He hadn't run when he found her broken. He had held her like a frost-bitten bud, without promises, without ornaments, without hollow vows. Only with the silent weight of his protection. And she, instead of opening, had turned to thorn. "What have I done to deserve his love?" she asked herself now, heart aching. "Nothing," she answered. And at the same time, everything. Because she had been herself. With her strength, and her fragility. With her longing to be loved, without enchantments. Outside, the sky began to part through the clouds. A pale ray of sunlight touched the damp fields of Scotland like a silent blessing. And high above, a hawk wheeled in slow circles, majestic, solitary. Arianwen followed its silhouette with her gaze, recognizing it. Caelan, tireless guardian, symbol of Eorn's wandering soul. A tear rolled down her cheek. Was he watching this same sky, from somewhere far away? Was he thinking of her? She longed to return to him. But coming back wasn't simple. She had left wounds in her wake, not just in him, but in her father, her clan, in all who believed more in the weight of a name than in the truth of a heart. And yet, if Caelan still flew above, it was because Eorn hadn't forgotten her. Not completely. The hawk never strayed from the one he loved. He was his shadow, his compass. Maybe there was still time. Maybe she could raise her voice like the hawk, and let love speak louder than fear. Arianwen rose, Pearl in her arms, with the contained tremor of someone preparing to face the inevitable. She would not run anymore. She would not lie. She would not pretend her heart didn't know what it wanted. Eorn wasn't guilty of loving her. If anyone had to speak, it was her. Not out of pride, but out of love. Chapter 37. Arianwen couldn't hold back the tears. Not from pain, nor from the humiliation of being discredited before her own father, but from the weight of a truth that seemed to find no echo anywhere in that room. A truth as clear to her as the sun now beginning to gild the green hills of Glorndunnock, beyond the window. King Bruce turned slowly to Aine. His voice held a disquieting calm, the kind found in someone who had seen wars ravage lands but still knew how to recognize the voice of a girl trembling to tell the truth. "Lady Aine," he repeated gently, "I ask that you continue. This is not a trial of your family's loyalty, but of justice itself." Fianna pressed her lips together like steel pincers. Tuiron O'Callaghan said nothing, but her face had gone grey. For a moment no one breathed. Aine whispered, staring at the floor as if she feared it might open beneath her feet. "I saw Fiachra Macabre push my sister into his chamber. I heard her scream. It wasn't a game, or an argument. It was fear. It was desperation." She lifted her gaze, meeting Arianwen's eyes. For an instant it was as if everything they'd never said as sisters floated in that silent bridge between them, the shared fear, the quiet injustice, the need to be seen. "I went in," Aine went on. "No one saw me. He let her go, but only because I was there. He looked at her like he hated her for breaking his pride. And that's when I knew, he wasn't the man she should marry. I knew it in my gut, Your Majesty. The way an animal knows when to run." Bruce nodded, never looking away from the young woman. Her words were not those of a frightened girl, but of a silent heir to pain and courage. "Thank you, my lady," he said gravely. "Justice needs more truths like yours." Arianwen stepped forward then, moving toward the king. Her legs did not tremble. Something inside her, broken since childhood, seemed to be mending with each word her sister spoke. "I don't ask for clemency for Aeon, Your Majesty. I ask that his truth be heard. That he not be condemned without a voice. He is no schemer. No politician or courtier. He's a free soul. Like his hawk, Caelan, who flies higher the darker the sky becomes." The king's eyes softened, caught by the image. "His hawk, you say?" "Yes. He has flown with him from the strange lands of Ireland to these highlands. Caelan hasn't left Aeon, not even when all hope seemed lost. Because he knows who his master is. Because he sees in him what men often refuse to see, nobility without titles. Loyalty without oaths." A ray of sunlight slipped through the window just then, gilding the loose braids of Arianwen's hair, as if the sky itself wished to affirm her truth. "The bonds forged by spirits are not broken by names or lands, Your Majesty," Arianwen said, her voice as calm as an ancient druid's prayer. "And I am bound to Aeon Macdara, not by the marriage we celebrated under the sky of a hidden parish, but by everything that words cannot explain." The silence that followed was not one of doubt, but of respect. At last King Bruce drew a deep breath, as if the scene had returned him to a purer, older, truer place. "Then we will go to Ter Nah Oiha," he said. "And I swear by the souls of my ancestors, that no sword shall be raised until I have heard Aeon Macdara. Not a single drop of blood more shall be spilled without justice." And then turning to Aine, he added with a trace of tenderness, "My lady, should you ever wish to be part of my court, know that Scotland will always have a place for a young woman who does not fear silence or truth." Arianwen took her sister's hand, and squeezed it without a word. Only then, looking upward, did she catch sight of a winged shadow crossing the sky. Caelan, tracing a perfect circle above the house, watchful, free, faithful. His soul was not alone. And then, for the first time in days, she knew she would find her way back. Deianira's tunic. Sometimes I think of the women who loved before me. The ones who gave their soul for a body they never knew how to inhabit without fear. I think of that woman, Deianira. Though I don't know the Greek myth nor her tongue. But I recognize her in myself. She too wanted to love well. She wanted to protect what she believed was hers. Not realizing that love is not possession. But fire, squeeze it too tightly and it burns you. She kept the blood of the one who hurt her. Not out of madness, but out of fear. Out of that brutal longing not to be left behind. not to be forgotten by the one she loved. And how many times have I done the same? Isn't this journey I began just another way of seeking a poison to help me love what I did not choose? To ask for a spell to learn how to love? Isn't that also a way of dressing in someone else's robe? A robe that might burn not just my skin, but the truth still pulsing inside me. But I don't want to love out of need. I don't want to bind myself to someone for fear of being alone. I don't want to kill what could be born just because I don't know how to wait. I am not Eira. And Aeon is not a hero meant to save me. And yet, there is something in him that calls to me. As if my soul remembered another life. One where love didn't hurt so much. I don't want to be loved out of pity, nor held out of duty. I want a love that hurts no more than truth. A love without robes or arrows. Without potions or poisons. A love that does not impose. That is not begged for. That is not feared. And if it doesn't exist, I'd rather have solitude than the slow death of what only pretends to be love. Ariane Wen. Chapter 38. Blood slid down his left cheek, warm and thick, like a red thread linking his brow to the earth. It fell slowly from the open wound on his eyebrow, traced the edge of his jaw, and finally dripped onto his bare chest, like a silent rite marking the passage of time upon his flesh. The highland wind, even here in hostile lands, whispered through the nearby trees with an ancient, almost ritual cadence. They had bound him to a wooden post, arms raised above his head, torso exposed, back torn. He wore only his breeches, and the skin on his back looked like the map of a shattered world carved with lashes. They had left him there, in the clearing, where the ramparts of Caer Thalen could see him. As a message. As a warning. But Aeon had no room left for hatred or fear. Only a vast heavy silence remained in him, spiritual, as if something greater than his enemy's violence was embracing him. He couldn't see well. His eyes swollen and blurred, barely made out faces. Yet he knew his people were near.
That from the cold stone of Caer Thalen walls, his clan was watching.
That his uncle, his brothers, perhaps Ariane Wen, were there, powerless, as broken as he was. And still, in his wounded soul there was no plea and no lament, only resistance. Silent. Unyielding. In the fog of his consciousness, pain and memory began to merge. Not memories of a comfortable or victorious life, but of fleeting luminous moments that made everything worthwhile. He saw his nephew's eyes, laughing in the sun, calling his name like in the old stories, Aeon the brave warrior. He heard their voices mingled with the elders' tales by the fire, with Ariane Wen's whisper in his ear, reciting the vow of their union. I vow to love you in this life and the next, where we will find each other again, remember, and love once more. Each blow in his mind became Ariane Wen's caress. Each spit, the kiss she gave him on the neck the first time she said she wasn't afraid. Each insult, her crystal laughter as they danced barefoot in the wet grass. There, among blood and mud, Aeon found a place where he was still human. Where he was still love. Dragon Mactuathal approached, his voice another wound across the desolate landscape. Are you listening, fool? Aeon barely lifted his face. His body hung limp, but on his lips rested something like a smile. That slight curve that was not mockery but faith. The faith of a man who no longer feared death.
What were you
saying? He murmured, his voice as broken as his skin. Dragon grabbed his hair, furious, forcing him to lift his head. I know what you're trying to do, he growled, spitting. You want me to kill you and end this, don't you? Please. Aeon whispered on an exhale. Do it already. But he didn't. Dragon preferred him alive, suffering. Preferred the torment to spread to those around him, like slow poison. For the Macdaras to watch helpless as their son was sacrificed. For Ariane Wen to feel what it meant to lose the man she loved, unable to fight for him. Look! Dragon shouted, shaking him. There they are. Your uncle, your people. The ones who love you. All watching you. All knowing they'll die with you. And then Aeon looked at him. For a moment his sky-blue eyes cleared, like a lake stirred by the wind. He looked at Dragon with all the strength he had left. Someday I'll die, Mactuathal, he said with ancestral calm, as if speaking from deep within the earth. And what will you do then? Dragon faltered. That man, lashed, bloodied, seemingly broken, spoke with the dignity of a king. Aeon continued. I paid my debt. I gave myself up as you asked. You can't enter Ter Nahoya without breaking your own word. The king will know the truth. Dragon stared at him for a long moment. Hatred danced in his eyes, but so did fear. Because in that instant, he recognized the true Aeon Macdara. No decoy. No trick. The same man who days earlier had broken his nose with savage courage. Unbelievable, Dragon muttered, lifting his face with a twisted sneer. You fooled us all. And that's when he drew the dagger.
Let there be no more doubt.
He stepped closer. Hands gripped Aeon's head tightly. And Aeon, without a scream, felt the cold blade slide across his right cheek. A slanted line. Then, another. A cross. A mark. An eternal wound. His flesh burned. Blood poured. But his spirit remained intact. Above, something cut across the sky. A hawk. Caelan. It circled above the scene, as if calling its companion's soul from the winds. As if weaving in the air a sacred promise, that even in suffering there is freedom. That even marked, even fallen, the Celtic spirit does not yield. Aeon closed his eyes. His body trembled, but his heart burned with a silent flame. I vow to love you in this life and the next. Let pain not erase love. Let the wound not eclipse the memory. Let the soul, even bound to a post, keep flying. Chapter 39. The sun descended slowly, as if the sky itself knew time was running out. Golden light melted over the earth in a soft sigh, and Aeon closed his eyes, searching for the one image that could still hold up his wounded soul, Arianwen's face. He wanted his final thoughts to be of her. If fate had come to claim his life, then he would give his wife the last beats of his heart. He imagined her standing before him, like in that forest clearing where he had first seen her, the breeze playing with her hair, her eyes glowing with that secret light that still undid him. He wanted to say goodbye with words that could never hold the vastness of what he felt. To tell her he loved her. That he'd known it too late, but with the strength of the irrevocable. He wished he could return to that moment when he bound his fate to hers, to repeat his vows not with fear but with certainty. He would have promised not only to shield her from all harm, but to walk by her side through rain and sun, never turning from the dark. He would have told her that her laughter was the only song able to awaken what lay sleeping in him, that her hands brought to his skin the calm of ancient rivers, and the tenderness of the lands that bore him. He would have promised she would never be alone again. That he offered her not just a name or a home, but his entire soul. And even if he faded away, she would have deep roots. The family that now belonged to her, Thalen, who already loved her like a daughter, 18, who would hold her as only wise mothers can, Tor, who would watch over her steps with the loyalty of a mountain, and the little ones who would return her laughter when winter grew long. My angel, he whispered to the horizon, where the sun sank into the earth like a warrior who does not wish to be mourned. Caelan circled above in slow loops, its silhouette cut against the gold of twilight. Like a spirit in wait. Like a symbol of what he was, of what he still longed to be, free, loyal, untamed. Sleep wrapped him like a soft mantle. He didn't know when he lost consciousness. But he knew, with every fiber of his being, when he awoke. Strong hands were loosening his bindings. A firm arm held him at the waist. Easy, son. It's over. I've got you. Father. His voice cracked, barely a thread through the fog. Forgive me for not coming sooner. My heart screamed for you, but I couldn't find the path. I couldn't bear it anymore. I had to come. In the shadows, Aeon saw his father's face, gaunt and yet more radiant than ever. As if love had given him back his youth, if only for a moment. Then he saw his uncle's face.
Let's go.
I'm getting you out of here. He lifted him as if time weighed nothing, as if a father's love were enough to break stone and death. In the distance, 2 bodies lay on the ground. Thick foul smoke rose in dark columns, confusing the sentries. Chaos had arrived like an ancient god, sowing distraction.
How?
Aeon murmured. Haven't you learned anything from me? His father replied, with a spark in his voice Aeon hadn't heard in years. Out of the darkness came an older man, moving to the other side to help. Waylorn, he asked, disbelieving. The very same. How many times do I have to save your hide, boy? There was no time for more. A scream tore through the silence. Through the dream.
They're escaping.
There they go. Soldiers' steps thundered, closer than expected. His uncle stopped. Take him, Waylorn. I'll hold them off.
No.
Aeon clutched at him.
You can't.
He turned, cupped Aeon's face in his hands and looked at him deeply. You are my pride. You and your brother are my life. This is the chance I was denied years ago, to die for you. And I'll do it without fear. He removed the clan brooch, and placed it in his nephew's hand as if he were his own son. Now it's yours. As we promised. Conall will understand. Before Aeon could answer, his uncle turned away, drawing his sword. His figure rose like a tower in the mist, stronger than ever. Like a guardian from the old legends.
No, no, no.
Aeon whispered as he was dragged away. The sounds of battle erupted, steel against steel, cries ripping through the night. Aeon, blind with tears, felt it all. He remembered every lesson, every duel, every gesture of his uncle. He saw him fight with a soul ablaze. Thalen Macdara, the man who had been like mother and father, the steady root, the lighthouse in the storm, was there giving his life for him. And Aeon knew he would never see him again. When the hidden door closed behind them, his soul revolted. No. Don't close it. He's out there. We have to go back.
Shush, easy, brother.
Conall held him. He was crying too. And in his eyes Aeon saw the weight of the choice. The shared wound of having obeyed one final order. Above, Caelan still circled. Watchful. Free. Like Aeon's soul still burning between love, loss, and the return to himself. Chapter 40. Encri agus in Seo.
The heart and the mist.
Bardu Guthmar and Gwitharan Loch Saker, Arc Lan la cum hac diomhe. Barmo Cri Chol An and Seo Nan Lathian, Gus and Dushen Tumim Erithist. The heart and the mist. Your voice was like the wind over the lake. Soft, yet full of hidden power. My heart was lost in the fog of days. Until you spoke my name again. Aeon didn't know when exactly the darkness had taken him. Perhaps it was when his battered body could no longer bear the pain. Or maybe it was his soul that broke first, unable to carry the weight of loss. Because beyond the torture, beyond the cold and the blood, what truly shattered him was knowing he would never see his father again. And yet, when he opened his eyes, the world still held him. It wasn't a dream. The air was warm, the light gentle, as if the day itself didn't quite dare to enter. His throat let out a faint groan, more of anguish than pain. Don't even think about it, said a voice that clawed at his heart with its rough tenderness. I won't let you punish yourself like you did in the past. This time you'll heal, and rise proud to be Aeon Macdara. Caelan. Lying face down, his uninjured cheek buried in a rough pillow, Aeon could barely turn his neck. But he recognized her before he saw her. There she was, the old woman of brews and visions, stirring salves beside a window open to the murmur of trees. As if nature itself breathed through her. And in case you're wondering, she added, yes, Waylorn and I are here for you. She turned toward him with hands full of bandages, and a clay bowl that reeked of strong herbs. We didn't save you years ago just to let them snuff you out now. Another voice, softer, drifted in from the other side of the bed. Thanks to them, Uncle was able to reach you. Aeon blinked, and his gaze met Rhiannon's. She stood beside him, serene and trembling all at once, eyes still wet from crying. He wanted to speak, but there was no need.
I had to take 18 away, she said.
She couldn't bear to see how they left you. She knelt by his side and took his hand firmly. That warm, steady pressure anchored him. Aeon felt that his heart, unraveling from pain, found a brief rest in that touch. As if life hadn't left him entirely. Caelan began applying the salve to his ruined back. The cold pierced his skin at first, but soon came the burning sting. Aeon clenched his teeth, sweat dampening his brow against the pillow. I had a dream shortly after you left, the old woman murmured as she worked. I saw you bound, bleeding. I knew it wasn't just a dream. It was a call. And when I told Waylorn, he didn't hesitate. We both knew we had to return. The distraction, the fire, the water. Aeon panted, trying to understand. All ours, Caelan nodded. No one notices an old soldier in disguise. No one watches a beggar woman pleading for bread. I poisoned the water. Waylorn lit the fires. And in the chaos, your father reached you. Rhiannon spoke in a whisper, as if recalling a prophecy. And Caelan came. The hawk flew to our battlements, with a message tied to his leg. No one stopped him. He knew exactly where to go. Caelan. Aeon whispered. His throat burned at the name, as if he'd spoken the name of his own soul. Caelan nodded. He guards you, Aeon. Even in dreams. The warrior closed his eyes. And there he was again, his uncle Thalen MacDara standing in the darkness, placing the clan brooch in his hand, calling him his pride. He opened his hand with difficulty, still clutching the object he hadn't let go of even in delirium. Rhiannon saw it. No one's been able to get you to open your hand, she said, touching the brooch with reverence. Now I understand why. He chose you. And you'll live up to it. Because you carry them within you.
Not just the brooch.
Father and uncle. Caelan finished bandaging his back, and moved to tend his cheek. She probed the wound gently, though not without pain. It'll leave a mark, she said plainly.
But sometimes scars are necessary.
They're the memory of the body, and the soul. Then came the salve, like fire. Aeon gritted his teeth, felt his whole body tremble. Rhiannon held his face with both hands and forced him to look at her. Her gaze was steady and still so kind. It's over. Take this, she said, bringing a warm infusion to his lips. He drank slowly, feeling the heat numb his limbs and draw down his eyelids. But his spirit refused to rest. No. Connell. I need. He'll come later, Rhiannon whispered, kissing his forehead.
Rest now.
You're safe here. Arianwen is waiting. And Caelan is watching. And so as silence returned to the room, Aeon surrendered to sleep. It wasn't full rest. It couldn't be, not while his father still faded in memory.
But something in him had changed.
He had been rescued not only from captivity, but from himself. And on that gentle night, while the Celtic wind brushed the northern hills and the hawk circled above like a wandering spirit, Aeon knew the soul does not die if there is love to sustain it. Chapter 41. The first light of dawn had not yet fully stained the sky, when chaos erupted again across the fields before Caer Thalen. From the battlements the MacDaras watched as the land seemed to tremble with the restless murmur of enemy soldiers. Smoke from small fires floated like a spectral mist over the camp, and the wind, damp and cold, carried the echo of tense voices, the creak of weapons being readied, the brief whistle of a hawk circling high invisible above their heads. We could strike now, Tor said softly, as if afraid the very air might hear him. They're disoriented. They won't see it coming. Connell didn't answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the churning plain where night still resisted death. His father's death beat within him like a silent drum. He would not let that sacrifice be in vain. We will not open the gates of Caer Thalen, he finally said, not looking away. Not yet. My father did not die for an impulsive decision. But they're vulnerable now, Diarmid insisted. Conall nodded, barely a gesture. And they will remain so, until our allies arrive. Today we resist. Today we honor those who gave everything to protect this home. Behind them, Caelan soared across the sky like a golden shadow among the first strands of light. His silhouette was barely a whisper among the clouds, but his presence embraced everything. Watchful. Free. When the first stone projectile struck the fortress walls, a tremor ran through every stone, every soul. It was like the roar of a beast awakening. Then another impact. Then screams. And the certainty that the battle had begun. Conall did not hesitate. He clenched his fists, raised his voice, and rallied his men. He became shield, order, the steady pulse of resistance. But he was not the one destiny watched that morning. It was Aeon. Chapter 42. In the dimness of a room where pain breathed with him, Aeon heard the echoes of war as one hears their own blood flow. Every creak of wood, every stifled cry, every tremble of the wall was an open wound that bled not on the skin, but in the soul. He tried to move. Fire coursed through his body with silent violence, as if every bone screamed that he could not. Sailor, he whispered. A familiar shadow approached. 18, as many times before, was there. Her voice trembled more than her hands. Rest. You can't. Where is Sailor? Here, boy. The old woman's voice was deep, like a distant bell in the fog. Aeon lifted his face toward her, like a wounded child who still believes in healing. Give me something that will let me walk. Just that. Walk. I have to go. You? Like this? Do you know what you're asking me? I can't lie here while mine bleed out there. My father died for me, for all of us. I have to be with them. 18 wept silently. Old tears that no longer made a sound. Sailor, however, watched him as one watches a son who has crossed the threshold of childhood and, without knowing it, become a man. I could kill you, she murmured. Then I die as a Mac Dara. But help me, Sailor. Not out of pride. Out of love. She finally nodded. Because she understood. Because she had seen it all, the thorns of pain, the scar of uprooting, the heart still beating with an unfulfilled promise. She prepared the potion without a word. 18 rose with a sigh that was almost a prayer. How many times will you ask me to send you to death, she said, not with anger, but with the weary tenderness of one who loves even when she doesn't understand. As many times as necessary, my dear 18, Aeon replied, voice low, with a trembling peace in his eyes. Until this place becomes our home again. She left. Sailor mixed herbs that smelled of wet earth, old roots, ancient blood. Even if you manage to get out of here, you won't be able to fight, she warned him. I'm not just a warrior. Now I am the laird. And what's at stake is not just a battle, but the faith of all who still believe this world, ours, has not been forgotten by the gods. His fingers brushed the brooch he still carried. The brooch his father had given him before dying. It was small. Fragile even. But it weighed like a legacy. From the window, Caelan circled the fortress once more. A point of light amid the storm. And Aeon, trembling, broken, bent over himself, began to stand. It was not a grand gesture. But it was the beginning of everything. Chapter 43. Outside, the world had changed. When Aeon finally managed to stand and walk beyond the threshold of his chamber, the battle had already ended. The wind carried ashes and leaves, and the Scottish sky, grey and ancient like a forgotten prayer, hung low over Caer Thalen. The ground was strewn with bodies, but no steel gleamed in the sun. Only the whisper of the river, and the distant whistle of hawks broke the silence. Caelan flew in high circles, as if watching not the battlefield, but the soul of the man who now made his way through the courtyard, slow, pained but upright. A young soldier, mud up to his knees, recounted what had happened with a still trembling voice. The Mac Ada had arrived like a firestorm from the east. And then, the banners of King Bruce. The monarch had planted himself amid the chaos with a stone gaze, and his mere presence was enough to silence the swords. The clans were summoned to the great hall. Everyone was there. All but Aeon. He took a deep breath, feeling the open wound of his inner exile. He knew he could not escape this judgment. He had to answer for what had been done. For what had been lost. For what still burned inside his chest. With every step bringing him closer to the hall, something inside him broke down and was reborn, not just a warrior but a whole man, torn and radiant. When the doors opened before him, silence fell. There was Bruce, majestic as a 1,000-year-old oak. On one side his own, on the other, men once called enemies. And among them, Arianwen. Aeon's heart, hardened by war and loss, gave a silent leap.
Aeon Macdara, said the king. The man who has risen from the dead, to sow discord among his own.
The remark fell like a stone in a pond, but Aeon said nothing. His gaze was anchored on Arianwen, and everything else seemed a distant murmur. He wanted to run to her. Feel her warmth. Tell her what burned in his soul, that he loved her. That he loved her with all the weight of his past, with the fury of his blood, with the trembling of his wounded flesh. He loved his wife. He could no longer deny it, nor bury it beneath duty or guilt. What had begun as a gesture of loyalty had become root, river, silent hymn that sustained him. I killed Maccabe, he said at last. I did it to save her. To keep him from touching her. I have no other defense, nor do I wish to invent one. And I do not regret it. The air tensed. Voices, accusations, shadows rose like specters of ancient clan hatred. But Aeon did not hear them. His truth was simple, bare, like the oak beneath the sky. He saved Arianwen, and he would do it again. Bruce heard everyone. Weighed their words like one weighs a fate. His voice when he spoke was deep as an echo in a cavern. There are clashing truths, and clans broken by the same knife. Only one thing remains to be done. And so as one awakens a sacred law, Bruce decreed judgment, combat. Not for revenge but for truth. When Dragon smiled upon hearing this, Aeon felt the uprooting and pain dissolve into a steady calm. He would face him. Even if his body burned with wounds, even if the world spun around him, he would do it. Not for honor, but for justice. For love. No one will fight for me, he said, voice clear as winter stream water. This battle is mine. His family tried to stop him. Conall, face twisted with helplessness, spoke of his condition, of injustice. But Aeon was no longer the boy who had marched to war. He was the man forged by the fire of loss and love. The man whom Caelan in his circling flight seemed to bless. I will find strength where I have none, he murmured. Before stepping into the courtyard, Arianwen appeared. The whole world folded away. She trembled. Her dress waved like water in the wind. Her loose hair fell like a dark river down her back. And her eyes were the light that guides the traveler home.
What have they done to you? She whispered, reaching out a hand that did not dare touch him.
Nothing that your gaze can't heal, he replied. She sobbed, as one who lets fall the weight of many moons. Forgive me, for not being with you. For leaving.
There is nothing to forgive.
I just want you to know. I know, she interrupted. And if I didn't, it wouldn't matter anymore. I love you, Aeon. And even if this cruel and ancient world falls apart, even if stones fall silent and clans forget, I will not. I was born to love you. Not even death will change that. Aeon closed his eyes. He clung to that voice, to that truth that anchored him to the world. In his arms, Arianwen became the only homeland possible. Outside the sky thickened with clouds, and the field prepared to see blood. But in that intimate, fleeting, eternal moment, Aeon knew he was not alone. He knew he had found the place where he belonged. And he would defend it. Stone and blood. Maybe we forget everything. When we stop listening to women. When the circle breaks. And we rush forward. As if the world could be won.
But the world isn't won.
It's lived in. Like living in a beloved body. And maybe that's what hurts the most. Taking so long to understand that the sacred isn't in glory, but in the trembling, in the touch that isn't given, in the tenderness one denies out of fear. Sometimes when she looks at me, as if something worthy still remains in me, I wonder if that might be the greatest act of rebellion. Not killing but feeling. Not taking revenge, but learning to hold the face of the one I love, without fearing it will break, or that it will break me. Aeon. Chapter 44. The Judgment of the Soul. Oath of the Magdara. Upon stone and upon bone, I swear by my blood and my steel, may the traitor fall nameless, and the brother die whole. If my clan calls for vengeance, may the moon hear the fire. There will be no peace in this spear, until the jewel is fulfilled. The wind swirled through the stone walls, as if the ancient spirit of the highlands itself had paused to watch what was about to happen there. In the center of the courtyard, beneath the pearl-grey morning sky, two figures waited. One stood tall with pride, the other torn inside, held up only by will. But there was a flame in his eyes, faint yet stubborn, like an ember refusing to die. Aeon tightened his fingers around the hilt that Waylorn had just placed in his hands. The steel felt heavier than ever, not because of gravity, but because of the weight of all it carried. Pain, blood, love. His body was battered, but his soul was still free. Saela watched him from the circle of allies. He spoke to her in barely more than a whisper. How long will your potion give me? I don't know. I've never seen a man so close to death choose to walk toward it of his own will. Aeon nodded, and for a moment, between the witch's echo and the murmur of those present, he felt the vibration of wings in the sky. He looked up, and there was Caelan, his hawk, circling above the fortress as if knowing the soul of his companion walked the edge between two worlds. Arianwen watched him. Her hands clasped, lips sealed in silent prayer, skin pale with fear. He lived for her. He would die for her. Everything else was noise. Dragon Mactuathal stepped forward. His voice dripped with contempt. Ready to crawl before me, Magdara? Aeon slowly lifted his head, as if he had been buried in the earth for centuries and was finally waking. You can't kill me, Mactuathal. Because I don't fight for myself. I fight for everything you will never understand. And then the fight began. The leaves clashed like flashes of steel. Aeon resisted, held back, dodged. Every move was a negotiation with pain. His back burned like a field scorched by war. But he kept his gaze fixed, not on Dragon but on Arianwen. In her was his center. His root. His father's words rose from the depths of his memory like an ancient chant. Keep a cool head and a burning heart. Failure always comes. Learn to see it. Learn to silence it. And so it was. Failure came. Blinded by his own hatred, Dragon changed his strike at the last second. The blade pierced Aeon's belly, and the world turned to mist. He fell to his knees. Arianwen screamed his name, and the cry tore through the veils of his mind. He did not want to die. Not like this. Not without her. Not without touching her face one more time. Not without feeling the warmth of her body against his in the darkness. Then Dragon leaned in, venomous like a specter. He whispered something by his ear. Words of threat, words of lust, words that called for Arianwen's ruin. It was the last spark Aeon's soul needed. A primitive growl rose from deep within his chest, a sound not of the human world but of the forest, a stone, the sky. An ancestral howl. His forehead collided with Dragon's face, the crack of bone against bone filled the air. He found his sword on the ground, raised it with bloodied hands, and with a shout that split the skies plunged it into his enemy's belly. When Dragon collapsed, still with surprise frozen in his eyes, silence wrapped the courtyard like a thick fog. Caelan descended in lower circles, as if wanting to witness his other self's triumph up close. Arianwen ran to Aeon without thinking of anyone else. He reached out a hand to her, while pressing the open wound in his stomach with the other. He held himself up, only by the miracle of love. And she held him by the waist, with the desperation and tenderness of one embracing a man returned from the brink. Together they turned to the king. "Your Majesty," said Aeon, his voice still alive though trembling, "truth has been spoken in blood. I hope I have dispelled your doubts. I did not kill Fiacre Macabre out of ambition but to protect my wife's life." Arianwen pressed him to her. Blood soaked his clothes but she didn't care. He was alive. And that was everything. King Bruce, visibly moved, gave his verdict. There would be no more war. No more bloodshed. Old quarrels would die with the dead. As the sun broke through the clouds, Aeon could barely stand. Arianwen held him. His brothers approached, but he shook his head.
"Her hands are enough for me," he whispered.
Conall looked at him with pride. "You are the laird now. Give the order." Aeon closed his eyes for a moment, breathed deeply and answered. "Find our people. Bring Thalen home." And as they walked away, surrounded by family and renewed loyalties, Caelan soared to the heights, a point of light among the clouds. Aeon's soul followed, still anchored to the earth by love, but knowing that its freedom, like the hawk's, would always be wild and true. Chapter 45. Through the Threshold. The Wound of the North. Reflection from Aeon, or from the earth itself, like an ancient whisper. When did we start calling honor what was really fear? Since when did we let steel speak for us? Sometimes, at the foot of the mountains, when the wind carries the salty breath of the sea, Aeon thinks he hears something older than pain. A voice buried in the earth, like a memory that refuses to be forgotten. The earth holds more than bones. It holds the trembling of children, who never returned. The cry of women no one listened to. The names of those burned for defending a banner they never understood. In the highlands, every stone is both a grave and a witness. They told us we were strong because we knew how to kill. They made us sing songs of glory while mothers sowed mourning. They made us call fate what was nothing more than the repetition of an ancient trauma.
But who was the enemy?
It wasn't the men of the other clan, nor the strangers who arrived on iron ships. The true enemy was the thought that separated the masculine from the feminine, the sword from the embrace, strength from tenderness. There was once another way to live here. The stone circles say so, the cave engravings, the hands that carved symbols in the rock to honor the moon. There was a time without kings, without castles, without flags. A time when life was offered in a circle, not a straight line. I don't remember it, but my blood does. And sometimes, when Arianwen's eyes rest on me without judgment, only presence, I feel the world could begin again. Not from conquest, but from compassion. Not from the lineage of power, but from the lineage of care. Maybe that is the true rebellion. Not taking up another sword, but breaking the pattern. Not revenge, but feeling. Not repeating, but healing. Returning to the circle. Returning to the center. Returning to her. During the days that followed, Arianwen barely left Aeon's side. The stone walls seemed to breathe in rhythm with their contained love. Each night, the flickering fire cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the whisper of the wind through the nearby fir trees carried echoes of ancient prayers. Arianwen watched over her husband with serene devotion, barely speaking, asking for nothing, as if her mere presence could ward off the fever still burning in his body. Saela prepared bitter brews and herbal ointments that brought a sweet drowsiness to the warrior. And when sleep claimed him, Caelan from the windowsill watched him motionless, as if his soul patiently awaited the moment to return from the other side of the threshold. Arianwen did not leave, not even to sleep. When exhaustion overtook her, she would fall beside the bed, her head on the mattress, her hand clasped in his. 18 in her quiet wisdom brought her fresh bread, warm broth, and each cold dawn covered her with a blanket, without disturbing the reverent silence of the room where the fate of a man and a woman was being decided. Aeon dozed, suspended between life and the invisible world of the ancestors. And in her dreams, Arianwen imagined his spirit wandering through forests and skies, guided by Caelan, until he found his way back to her chest. Then one afternoon, when the wind smelled of moss and wet earth, she felt trembling fingers brush her cheek. She opened her eyes with a start. Eon was looking at her, finally awake. On his face the shadow of pain mingled with a new, gentle light, as if he had just been born again. "What a beautiful sight to return to the world," he whispered, his voice hoarse but alive. Arianwen sat up suddenly, tears refusing to wait any longer. "How do you feel?" "Like a man who has been given back to life, just to see your eyes again." He took her hand with a strength he didn't know he had. "Don't leave again, Arianwen. No matter what your father says, or judgment, or war. I won't give up on you." "Did you dream of that while you slept?" she asked with a trembling smile. "I dreamed of you. I kissed you, held you, whispered how much I love you." She lowered her head, and gently stroked his damp hair with infinite tenderness. "Aeon, I didn't understand what love was. I thought it was protection, making up for past mistakes. But what I feel for you, it's something else. It's like the river's song when it cradles the stones. It's as deep as the roots of the oaks, as sacred as the ancient circles where our ancestors spoke with the gods." His eyes sought Arianwen's, and there was no shadow or shield in them. "You gave me back my heart. You warmed it when I thought it no longer beat. And when you left, I knew I had given you more than my soul, I had given you my truth. Without you, there is only silence. With you, the world has music again." Arianwen couldn't help herself. She leaned in and kissed his lips with a sacred tremor. "I love you too, Aeon." "I already knew," he replied, closing his eyes as his forehead touched hers. "Your love called me from the abyss. It gave me strength to return." She caressed his face with a reverence that felt like a prayer. "And now I want to give you news that will make those strengths grow even more." "What news?" Arianwen leaned closer, more serious now, a contained glow in her eyes. "It's your uncle." Silence fell like a heavy cloak. "Connell went to find him after the battle, to give him a proper burial. And he found him. Alive. Just a breath, but alive. Caelan had to amputate his arm to save him. But he survived, Aeon. Thalen lives." The warrior closed his eyes. A deep sigh rose from the depths of his chest, as if an ancient stone dissolved within him. "My uncle," he murmured. "He's alive. You'll see him soon. I'll take you when you have the strength." Aeon extended a trembling arm. "Then stay with me now. Just a little longer. Don't call anyone. I don't want witnesses. I just want to feel you close. To hear your voice again when you tell me you love me." Arianwen did not hesitate. She lay down beside him, wrapping herself in the arms of the one who had crossed the threshold of death for love. Caelan at the window watched them silently, like a sentinel of the skies, witness to the rebirth of his soul. And in that sacred stillness between skin, whispers and promises, Arianwen felt that the world could begin again. Because as long as the forest spoke, as long as the wind carried prayers, and Aeon's eyes searched for hers with that raw truth, nothing was lost. There was a future. And it would belong to both of them. Chapter 46. Where the Wind Dwells. Reflection from Arianwen o Calia. My body remembers what my history forgot. The wars were not ours, but we carried them in our wombs. In the songs sung to fall asleep without crying. In the letters that never arrived. In the husbands who returned strangers, or never returned at all. They told us that was love. To wait. To obey. To serve. But I no longer want a learned love. I want a love born from the heart, not from fear. That's why I went to Caelan. That's why I asked for a spell. Not to fake love, but to awaken something that already exists. Even if it still sleeps beneath layers of inherited pain. Maybe the spell doesn't come from words. Maybe it comes from the courage to listen to my own heart. To stay where history tells me to run away. To look in the eyes of the man who carries his own ruins, and not be afraid. I want to walk.
But to another place.
To a time where loving is not obeying. Where sweetness is not mistaken for weakness. Where the earth, seeing us together, him and me, two survivors of broken lineages, can finally say,
yes.
Something is healing. The next day, Eorn left his bed for the first time since the battle. He still walked slowly, but his steps were steady, guided by Arianwen's hand. The light streaming through the tall windows of the hall couldn't erase the pale tone of his skin nor hide the wound that traced his cheek, but something in his gaze had changed, a serene stillness, as if the pain had left a mark deeper than the flesh. There was no noise, no crowds. Only the crackling of the fire, and the whisper of the willows beyond the stone. Arianwen helped him sit on a bench by the window, where he could look out toward the forest. Caelan circled overhead, his silhouette outlined against the leaden sky. I thought I'd never see this again, Eorn whispered, not taking his eyes off the horizon. I believed I'd lost forever the right to the light, to silence, to you. Arianwen didn't answer immediately. She sat beside him and gently took his hand. His skin was rough, marked by fever and battle, but still burned with the strength of a man who refused to break. You haven't lost anything, she said with a tenderness that wrapped around his soul. You have returned, and that is all that matters. A moment of silence embraced them. The hawk descended in a slow spiral and perched on a nearby stone, watchful, still, like an ancient shadow guarding something sacred. Caelan hasn't abandoned me, Eorn murmured, with a faint melancholy smile.
He always comes back, just like you.
Maybe because there's nothing to abandon, Arianwen replied. Because you belong to this land, to this wind, to these roots, just like him. Eorn turned his gaze toward her. Her face, framed by the soft midday light, seemed unreal, as if she had emerged from the very song of the forests. He loved her with a truth that needed no words or promises. I don't know what kind of man I am now, he confessed. I carry inside me the wound of having left, and of having survived. You are more than that, Arianwen said, touching his face with her fingers. You are someone who has returned with an open soul, and that makes you more human, not less. Eorn bowed his forehead and rested it against hers, as if he needed to anchor himself to her warmth. He breathed deeply, and in that breath there was no bitterness or fear, only the gentle acceptance of one who has understood that life, even broken, can be sacred.
You saved me, he whispered. Not just the body, but everything I thought could never heal.
And you've given me a place, Arianwen answered. Where I can be myself without hiding. Where love doesn't weigh but lightens. Then he kissed her without hurry, as if time had stopped just for them. And while their lips met, Caelan took flight again, rising toward the skies, crossing the cold air with the majesty of the eternal. It was a moment without artifice. A place between worlds where only they existed, the hawk's watchful soul, and the murmur of the earth that had brought them together. Epilogue. Inish 4 Island, Ireland, April 1315. Our lost paradise. When hunger came, and some returned to where they had once been happy. In 1315, Ireland began to tremble. Edward Bruce, brother of the King of Scotland, had landed with an army and proclaimed himself King of Ireland, seeking to unite both Celtic kingdoms against England. But the land did not welcome him with gratitude. Rains came, crops failed, and hunger spread. The people, exhausted by others' promises, turned against everyone. Amid the chaos, two figures stepped away from the world of men for a moment. Arianwen and Eorn, fleeing war, duty and noise, walked toward a remote corner of Northern Ireland where they believed they had once been happy. They called it Tir an Éineog, though they knew it was nothing more than a cliff, a ruined house, and the sound of the sea.
But sometimes love is built on the margins of history.
And sometimes all it takes is a sacred place, even if made of rock and wind, to remember that there was a time when everything was possible. The ocean wind came laden with salt and memories, whistling through the cliffs like an echo of old songs. Eorn lifted his gaze toward the horizon, where sea and sky merged in a grey and blue embrace. The waves crashed below, foamy and free, as if dancing to a music only the soul could understand. Arianwen stood by his side, wrapped in a wool cloak that trembled gently with the wind's sway. Her loose hair seemed to gather the voices of the Atlantic. "This is where I first realized the world was vast," she whispered, "and that there was so much I still didn't understand." They were atop the cliff where their paths had once crossed. Now, time later and with wounds healed, they had returned as husband and wife. Caelan had left them her cabin, and Aeorn without hesitation had brought her there. Not out of nostalgia, but because he knew there was something sacred in that landscape, something that could only be understood through love. He wanted Arianwen to see the sea again with the eyes of someone who no longer seeks, but has found. "Do you remember when I asked you to run away in search of Tir Na Nog?" he said with a soft smile. "I didn't know then that we had already found it. Here, with you in this corner of the world." She slipped her fingers between his, warm despite the cold. "Our paradise isn't a place, Aeorn. It's what we carry inside, you and me. A refuge unseen, but alive in every step we take together." Aeorn held her silently. He felt her fragility in his arms and at the same time her strength, the same strength that had saved him. A gust of wind lifted his cloak, and from somewhere in the grey sky the sharp cry of a hawk cut the air. They looked up in unison. Caelan traced a perfect circle above them, like an ancient spirit still watching over them. Aeorn's free soul kept flying up there, even when his body had surrendered to another home. "Are you cold?" he whispered. "A little. But I won't move until the sea swallows the sun." The words hung in the air just as the sky was torn by lightning. Thunder followed immediately, deep and solemn, like the voice of the gods. Then rain. Thick, sudden. Soaking them without mercy. Arianwen closed her eyes and laughed, drenched from head to toe. "I won't leave because of a storm, Aeorn. Not when the world has dressed itself this way just for us." But Aeorn was already laughing too, brushing a wet strand from her forehead. "Come, let's go. There are other ways to worship the storm." They ran hand in hand toward the cabin, like children, like two lovers unafraid to get wet when life offers them another dance. Inside the fire still burned. The slow crackling of the wood filled the silence with its ancient music. Arianwen shed her wet cloak. The dress fabric clinging to her body traced her form with an almost sacred softness. Aeorn watched her silently, his heart tight with the beauty of the moment. She approached the hearth with outstretched arms seeking warmth. Aeorn closed the door behind him, and stood still for a moment, as if unwilling to break the spell of that image. Then he moved closer slowly, as if walking toward an altar. "You're trembling," he whispered. "And you are too." She turned, and their eyes met. No words. Only the sound of their breaths. Aeorn lifted a hand and placed it on her cheek. She closed her eyes trusting, and rested her forehead against his. Water still dripped from her hair. But the warmth between them grew like a new fire. "You are my home, Arianwen. And every storm I endured was just to find you." She embraced him. Like someone embracing a destiny long sought. Then, with slow, almost ceremonial movements, they began to undress each other. No rush. No dizziness. Only the need to know themselves as skin and soul. Aeorn untied the laces of her bodice, with the reverence of one unveiling a secret. The fabric slipped from her shoulders, revealing the sheer camisole. He didn't rush to remove it. He paused to look at her. The wet cotton revealed her rosy skin, the contours of her body, as if the moon had carved her with light. He touched her tenderly. His large hands rested on her breasts without hurry, caressing, warming. He kissed her softly. First the lips. Then the neck, the collarbone. Arianwen responded with low moans, lost in his chest. When he lifted her into his arms and carried her to the bed, it wasn't just carnal desire. It was like carrying her to the center of the world, to the place where the soul finally surrenders without fear. The love they made was unhurried. It was a slow language, made of breaths and caresses that said, "I recognize you. Arianwen moved over him with the grace of a river, and he followed like a tree leaning toward the light. At some point the camisole tore, but not from lust, out of the need to see her whole, to touch her without veils. And when they were skin to skin, embraced, their bodies spoke as if they had always been made to find each other. To heal. To burn together. In the end, when their bodies gave in and their breathing was only a whisper among shadows, Aeorn covered Arianwen with a blanket. Exhausted, she rested her cheek on his chest, right over the scar shaped like a cross. "I've discovered something," he murmured, still trembling inside.
"What is it, my love?"
She lifted her head, her eyes calm yet glowing at the same time. "I'm your angel. Not one of those you imagine on altars." He smiled, touching her cheek.
"Then what kind?"
"I'm your angel of the forest and of strange lands. Everything you lived, everything you lost, brought you here. And me. And if you hadn't traveled that long road, now it would be me who was lost." Aeorn hugged her tighter, closing his eyes. "Then I give thanks for every step, even the painful ones. Because you are my paradise, not the one you find but the one you choose." She kissed him slowly. Outside the storm had calmed. Only the sound of the sea remained. And the distant beating of wings high above, free, watchful. Irish cliff sunset. Beneath Caelang's wings. The wind blew fiercely from the sea, lifting salt and low clouds that brushed the rocks like fleeting spirits. At the cliff's edge, Aeorn crouched beside a flat stone, spreading out a crumpled linen cloth. On it he carefully placed a still warm piece of bird's heart. "Come, Caelan," he said softly. The hawk descended from a dry juniper, its wings slicing the air with a precise hum. It landed on the boy's gloved forearm without fear, and for a few seconds they looked at each other, one with eyes of fire, the other with a silent melancholy he still didn't fully understand. Aeorn brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. He had learned to move quietly, not to invade the animal's space with unnecessary gestures. The respect between them wasn't domestication, but a pact. Caelan tilted his head, tore off a piece of meat, and swallowed it effortlessly. A thread of blood stained the cloth. Aeorn didn't flinch. He had been caring for him for months, not knowing why it felt so natural. Sometimes he thought he had known the hawk before forgetting himself. "You really are free," he murmured, with a hint of a smile. The hawk pecked once more and looked out toward the sea, as if it knew something was coming, that something or someone would soon break the fragile calm of the cliff. Aeorn followed that gaze, not fully understanding it, but feeling that something inside him was also preparing. Behind them, at the cabin door, Arianwen watched in silence. When he arrives, he still won't know he's come for him, she thought. The legend of Arianwen and Aeorn. On the coast where the wind cries, where the foam kisses the cliff, lived a name that time does not erase. A promise that has never been silenced. He, forged in iron and silence, fled from shadows that were not his own. She, made of light and mystery, broke the bars of ancient mists. Arianwen, flower of aching lands, from a lineage of fire and chains, swore not to love the one she did not choose, but loved the one destiny condemns. Aeorn, hawk with a wounded wing, kept his name among sleeping ruins. Yet the echo of the soul, faithful sentinel, awoke in his eyes the lost homeland. They crossed the sea, fled the noise, seeking shelter in Tir Na Nog. But love, unafraid of forgetting, called them again to old danger. And there where the sky meets the stone, where the raven sings and the earth moans, two hearts carved their song. Into the legends dawn remembers. The land has not forgotten. Every night, when the wind blows over the hills, the echo of war drums can be heard. The roots still drink the blood of men who fell for clans that no longer exist. The trauma remains etched in the ground, like a sacred burn that still weeps. But there is another myth. One that comes from the south, from other lands, but that also belongs to us. They say that Hercules after death was welcomed by the goddess Hebe. That he laid down his weapons, his fury, his broken body, and was purified. They say she, the goddess of youth and compassion, offered him water and forgetfulness, not to erase but to transform. What if we could also hang up our weapons? What if there were a sanctuary here, among the oaks, where warriors could cry without being judged? What if Aeon could sleep a whole night without seeing fire? What if I could look at a man, without thinking of the transaction that brought him into my life? Maybe that is what the earth wants. No sacrifices, no monuments, no more songs of war.
But the return of those who can still love.
Because where blood was spilled, a garden could grow. Where the home burned, a temple could rise. And where before we only knew how to repeat the wound, we could finally remember how to heal. Caelan and the magic of the center. They told me the soul doesn't heal like the flesh does. The soul is summoned. And when summoned, it reassembles. That's why when Arianwen arrived, with her lineage dress and trembling hands, I didn't offer her forgetfulness, nor a spell to twist the thread of her fate. I offered her memory. A spark of light. A threshold to what already sleeps in her heart, even if she doesn't yet know how to name it. Magic doesn't compel, it awakens. And if ever my fingers trace signs in the wind, if I whisper words at dawn or light stones between salt and moss,
it's not to change the world.
It's to harmonize what's inside with what's outside. The rhythm of the universe with the beat of blood. The dance of constellations with the wound burning in the chest. I descend from women who spoke with the moon, who wove with invisible threads what others call destiny, who knew that to love is also an act of memory, and that the greatest enchantment is to give someone back the courage to see and to choose. Trauma breeds more trauma. And it's true. We've seen it. In mothers who stopped singing. In children who learned to hate before they could walk. In men who return from war,
but never truly come back.
Aeon carries one of those wars inside him. No matter how far he rides, there is something in him always returning to the field where his brother fell, where his village burned, where he himself learned to stop feeling. And Arianwen, she knows it too. Not for having wielded a blade,
but for having been offered as a promise.
For having been the price of a peace no one knew how to build. For that silence that comes after sacrifice, when a woman must smile and obey, as if her flesh weren't screaming. They are both children of the same wound, even if their bodies bore it differently. Because love is not just fate, it is memory in motion. The bodies are drawn to each other, yes, but it's the souls that recognize. And when they recognize, the whole earth rejoices. In Aeon's bones echoes the sacred geometry of the lost clan. In Arianwen's heart dances the silver water of the feminine. He is structure, she is flow. He is night that protects, she moon that remembers. And together, perhaps, they can find a way to heal what others broke. Not through battles, not through names, but with the radical softness of love that dares to look again. Because there is something only the heart knows. The earth does not forget those who have loved it. And true love is not only the one that chooses. It is the one that remembers. I am not daughter of fire or water, but of the balance between both. I was taught to listen to the murmur of roots beneath the earth, the groan of the wind through the oaks, the song of the water as it lets itself fall. The elements do not obey, they converse. And I am that threshold. There is a web of light, ancient as the bones of the world, that ties stone to star. It is not written in any human tongue, but I understand it. It is the same web that whispers to the mountains when to bloom, that guides birds lost in the fog, That opens an invisible rose in the hearts of lovers. I feel it when I'm silent. When I place my hands upon damp earth. When I blow breath over someone else's wound. I was taught that the soul does not heal like the body. The soul is remembered. And when it is remembered, it is restored. Final reflection, common voice. The soul doesn't join by chance. It seeks where it most needs to be seen. And true love isn't the one that doesn't hurt,
but the one that hurts with purpose.
In the wound each one carries, the other finds the chance to love differently. And in that dance between chains and wings, the earth sings what the soul has not yet known how to say. The life I desire also desires me. And we meet halfway. The end.